Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Iron Age Marketing. I am Nicky P, here as always. My guest today is Steven Huddler, or Hudler. How do you pronounce
Hudler.
that? Hudler. Interesting. I like it when it defies expectations. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to do what you do?
Well, my name's Steve, and I am a writer. I have always wanted to be a writer. I thought when I was younger that I might want to write comic books, but that didn't kind of happen. Life did. I had a couple ideas for stories, and I never really did anything with them. And then one day my wife was like, why don't you just go ahead and turn all these ideas into a book? I thought, I've never written a book before. So a couple months later, I finally decided to set my laptop down on my kitchen table, and I started typing up. And before I know it, I had 4 chapters into my first book, and I've been going ever since.
That's especially rare that you have a wife that's like, hey, how about you do something here, as opposed to, you need to stop spending your time doing this thing that you love to do.
Well, luckily at the time, she was working nights. So we have a daughter. I put my daughter to bed, and she wasn't home till about 11 o'clock at night. So I had like 3 or 4 hours just to not do nothing. So that was my writing time.
Well, that's awesome. It's good that you can fit that in with like family, because I know that's something a lot of people struggle with. Predominantly, my audience does tend to be men in their late 30s, early 40s, dealing with family life. What do you do when you come home from the factory? That kind of thing. So finding a place that it works in there. When you read your bio, it focuses a lot around like superhero fiction. Now, why is that a place that you wanted to go? Is there a particular reason that gravitates to you? I love horror. Horror is my thing. I couldn't begin to tell you why I like horror. It's just what I've always liked. Is it similar with you, or is there like something defining why that it is?
When I was a wee little kid, I saw Spider-Man on this TV show, and it just captivated me. And I bugged my parents to buy me a Spider-Man comic book, which they finally did. And I was just, it's something about him, the way he acted, the way he was, his heroism, the way he put himself out there to defend people. Even as a kid, I thought that was pretty cool. So as I got older, I started collecting more comic books, and it just kind of sparked my imagination. So, like I said, I wanted to write comic books because I thought I was reading them a lot, and I thought, well, maybe I can write them. But again, that never worked out, and I had all these ideas written down, and I got kind of down on myself, having this huge pile of stuff that I just wasn't doing anything with. And like I said, my wife finally said, just go ahead and write it down. I think superheroes are important in today's culture. If you look out your window today, things aren't very good. There's a lot of just bad stuff going on. So superheroes, they're kind of what we like to try to strive to be if we were better people. And since I can't be a superhero, I thought I'd write about it. So I like to write about things that will inspire, that will let people, at least through reading, feel like they're going out and they're doing something good.
So that's actually really interesting to me in that. So obviously, starting in comics, probably in the late 80s, it was the vogue thing became the deconstruction of the superhero. Now, I think probably now more than ever, like, the world needs Superman, like a real Superman out there, just a beacon, a symbol of hope. Like, we don't need gritty and dark. We've had so much of that like, yeah, when the world is feeling kind of great and everything, you still kind of got some of that 1950s hope. Maybe it makes sense to kind of go, oh, well, let's tear this apart and look at it. But I can look out my window and see all the gritty and dark I ever want. So it's exciting to me that you mentioned that aspect of the character, of like the medium. Do you have any specific thoughts, and do you see that kind of coming to an end in the broader culture, or you kind of feel like you're the answer to what the broader culture isn't getting right now?
Yeah, I really don't see it becoming, ending anytime soon. Unfortunately, with things like The Boys on Amazon, that is a very dark and gritty superhero show. I think that's the most deconstructed I've ever seen heroes.
The comics themselves are actually far worse. I
Yeah.
like the comics, but like my issue with the TV show is that they're poorly written deconstruction, personally. But we don't have to go there.
A lot of the comic books these days don't really seem to want to confront just heroism. Captain America doesn't seem to be Captain America anymore. He's kind of dark and dirty. Like I said, Superman used to be called the Big Blue Boy Scout. And back in the 80s and 90s, that was like a bad thing. Everyone tried to darken him up, but we need more Big Blue Boy Scouts these days. And I think what I'm writing kind of fills that gap.
Well, it's strange, and it's like part of the problem is that we're in a place where the Big Blue Boy Scout, it just doesn't make sense to people because they feel so down about society that they can't imagine anyone being that good. It's like the aspiration of goodness like that. It's just something that they can't even fathom. And that's, to me, that seems like a dangerous place to be culturally, aside from the fact that like it sounds like a really sad place to find your fiction. Like if we can't even conceive of the idea of someone who is just good, like where are we at there?
Yeah.
The other thing I want to know here is you're writing books, you're not writing comics. Is that a choice because for financial reasons, comics means let's go find an artist who shares my vision, we're gonna bring my vision to life, and then I'm gonna spend a ton of money to like do this for everyone I have? Or was it just, it just made more sense to you to make books? Because it was, like I said, superheroes, you think comics, you don't usually think just prose, you don't think fiction in that regard.
Yeah. Originally, it was, I kind of kept all my ideas to myself because I couldn't find an artist or anything. And the money thing was an issue. Working, and my wife was working, and we had a small child, and just really couldn't lay out the money at the time. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they didn't have Kickstarter and stuff yet. So when I finally did decide to write, about a week or so before my wife suggested me writing books, I was at a little comic book convention, and the guy there who drew his own comics, and I kind of mentioned my ideas. He said, "Why don't you write them like a pulp novel and have someone just do some black and white art for you and put it out periodically?" And then my wife said, "Well, if you're going to do that, might as well just go whole hog and just write the whole book." So I did. And I found that I really love writing fiction. I mean, I love writing novels. It's just, when you're doing comic books, you have a writer and you have an artist, and the writer writes in his script, action happens. And it's up to the artist to describe that action through his art. I have to actually write that down, and I have to convey that to the reader. And I find that very fun to figure out different ways to convey action as I'm writing it down.